What is going on, guys? My name is Everett and welcome back to another episode of Pepper with Everett. Today, we have someone who I have watched play literally my entire volleyball career. Since I have known about volleyball, he was one of the first people that I ever saw play. He is a 13-year member of the Canadian national team. He is a 12-year professional. He is the 2005 best setter at the NORCECA Championship. He is a bronze medalist from the 1999 Pan Am Games. He is one of the few people in Canadian volleyball, probably the only person that I'm aware of who has worked with both the women's national team and the men's national team. And he is currently the head coach at the UBC of British Columbia Okanagan, UBC Heat, who are on their best ever start to the season at 11-1, sitting first place of the Canada West, ranked fourth in the in U Sports. Welcome to the show, Mr. Scott Koskie. Scott, welcome to the show, Coach. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing really well, Everett. Thanks. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Of course. Are you in the Okanagan right now? Are you in the Valley?
Yeah. I'm in just a little bit north of the university, so a little part of the valley there, called Lake Country, and we have one of those rare, as I'm learning, Okanagan days where the sun is out. So sun is out. It's about plus 10. So as a Winnipeg guy, I'm not complaining. Yeah.
Plus 10. That sounds real nice, man. I wish it's not even that in Toronto right now. It's been frigid in Toronto recently. You know, in those Okanagan winters, especially down in the valley, are pretty nice, are pretty temperate, especially as a Winnipeg guy like yourself.
Totally. I was just chatting with my family last week when it was in the minus 40s, and I can't say I missed that very much, but it would be nice if we had a little bit of snow. You know, if I want to get really picky about creating the perfect Christmas experience.
That's true. I mean, I have some family over there in Kelowna, and not much snow whenever I've gone to visit them. So lots of snow up in the mountains. You know, if you're a skier, if you like Big White or Silver Star or Apex or one of the other great hills in the area. Do you ski? Are you a mountains guy?
No, you know what? I never got the opportunity to ski. I played in Europe in and around a bunch of ski hills. But I had one general manager one time, he said, hey, listen, if you want to go ski, there's great resorts here, go ahead. But if you injure yourself, I'm not giving you a dime until you come back. And that was the end of my curiosity around skiing. So I don't know, maybe I'll have to give it a go, but no, I'm getting to the age where, the cost benefit, you got to weigh it out carefully.
I mean, hey, Big White has some nice long leisurely runs that you can just kind of coast on your way down if you like that. I don't know if you noted this, but I am actually technically a Winnipeg boy myself. I was born in Winnipeg back in '92. My dad was doing his PhD at the U of M while you were playing. Okay. So maybe there's a point where we cross each other over, me in a carriage, you walking through the halls of the University of Manitoba over there.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah,
cool.
Although I did move away. I think I was like 3 or 4 when I moved to Ottawa. But still, I still have that. I still have that Manitoba birth certificate with a nice little bison on it. But we're not here to talk about Manitoba just yet. We'll definitely talk about some Manitoba. Yeah. But as I mentioned before, UBCO, the Heat are currently off to their best season start ever. You guys are 11-1 to start the year. It's been a fantastic run. You're number 1 in the Canada West, number 4 in the nation right now in the national rankings. And, you're only a year and a half into your tenure so far at UBCO. You were hired in May of 2024. Does this start to the season kind of meet or surpass expectations that you had for this group?
Well, there's probably two ways to answer that. We got a really experienced group. We have a lot of guys that are, when you're in the university landscape, when you're coming around to year 4, year 5, we have a bunch of guys there that are physically mature, are really starting to understand the game, and time is kind of starting to be of the essence. When you get to that age, it's you're towards the back end of year 3, year 4, year 5. If you're going to get close to what your full potential is, that's the time that it's going to happen. At least in my my experiences being around the game for a while. So from that point of view, I think we were well positioned. I felt that we were well positioned. Physically, technically, tactically, all that sort of stuff, to play some really high level volleyball. The second part of that, the record, that's just a bit of a reflection of what we were able to do. I think it's a real testament to the guys, how we've played. We've been involved in a lot of different matches. We've had some that have gone our way when they probably shouldn't, but that's the way that sports goes. So, I was really excited what we could do this year. Did I think we could perform at a high level? Yeah, I absolutely think we did. Would I have drawn 11-1 on the board at the break? No, I wouldn't have. But these guys have done some great work, and we're really happy to be here.
Earlier this year, that one loss that you suffered was to Alberta in a split, but that win that you guys got Alberta was the first ever win for UBCO as a program against the Golden Bears. What was that experience like? And, how do you, after a match like that, how do you kind of regain control of the room and kind of send them the message like, hey, this doesn't really mean anything. It's our second weekend of the year. We still need to keep our heads down, and we've got a long way to go.
Yeah. Well, that's what I've been about, since I started here, kind of taken, I would say, the longer term approach to it. We make sure that we're celebrating the small, victories that happen. It sounds a little cliche, but, we're celebrating the things that happen throughout the week. When we get the opportunity to play on Friday and Saturday, we really want to make sure that we enjoy the outcome. But I said to them, I think, starting that weekend, I said, hey, it's great. After that first win, we were 3-0. I said, make sure you guys feel good about this and you're proud about the work that you've done. But 3-0 on whatever that was, November 9th or whatever day that was, that's, people might raise a bit of an eyebrow, but that's really, in a few months from now, that's not really going to get you anything. So, and that's kind of the approach we've taken. We want to make sure, one of the things we said earlier in the season, and the guys are really starting to buy into it, is that, our goal is that the conversation that we have at the end of the game, should be the same, independent of the result. It'll feel different, depending if we have the W or the L, but the conversation that we're going to have, will be the same. Our focus on the process and what we want to do, ultimately is going to determine who we are, and so, the guys have been great at that. They've bought into that message. It's not an easy thing to really grasp. But we've done a good job, of balancing our successes, enjoying the small victories that are, kind of along the path, and we'll see what lies ahead.
I mean, when you took over this program back in May of 2024, they had just come off not a great season. They were 3-21 overall, and now collectively over the past two seasons up to this point, you're now 20-10. You went 9-11 last year. So far, you're 11-1. What are some of the baseline things that you established when you came into this program, or what are some of the new habits that you established within the culture when you first joined this team?
Well, there's a lot of things that I brought forward. I was really lucky to play for a lot of great coaches, and so a lot of the stuff that I brought forward isn't mine. It's stuff that I've learned. That I brought forward with me. From guys like Garth Pischke and Stelio Duraco and Glenn Hogue, and I would say, where I started was, I explained to the guys that my job here is to teach. It's not to judge. It's not to evaluate. You have what you have. And if I feel like we need more or we need to do something differently, then it's my job to teach you that. I took a bit of the approach that, I have, like I said, I've had some great experiences with a lot of coaches and a lot of players. And I'm going to do my best to bring those things into our relationship every day in the gym. But I'm not looking to be right all the time. If I say something that doesn't resonate, or if I say something that's just wrong, like I've misread a situation, I need you guys to feel comfortable, and saying, hey coach, I don't see it that way. Right. And so, kind of from that foundation of teaching, vulnerability, then we kind of started to then on top of that, we started to to decide what the standards were that we were, willing to accept, and not outcome or not results-based standards, but the standards that we want to hold ourselves to, in each part of our training and in each part of our week of preparation. And really then we, from there, the guys have bought in, so it's been, we've grown a lot in a short period of time. And I knew that if we wanted to make something happen really quickly, we had to get to a point where we trusted each other, we could be open with each other, and we could be vulnerable with each other. And and so far it's, sometimes it's, the personalities just fit. The group of guys that we have here, fit with my sort of personality, and we've been able to achieve some great things.
How much of it has it been like a collaborative process? As you mentioned, you've got a group of really mature athletes. Some of your leaders like Seba Manuel's in his 4th year, Zach Van Giel, your setter's in his 5th, Tyson West Street is in his 4th as well. So how many of those guys have helped you kind of push that and build that culture as kind of like a back and forth with those athletes?
Yeah. Well, those guys that you named, for sure, they've been here, they've been here, they've been in the Okanagan, they've been at the school, for a long time. And so I really wanted to understand what those guys were about, and like in any team environment, right? You need the buy-in from the entire group. And that in any group, there's always going to be that small group of guys that is going to be able to do the work, but then is also going to be able to lead others to do the hard work, that maybe they I would say don't know how to do yet. Right. And, guys like Seba and Zach and Tice, even Ashton last summer, these guys have had a little bit of time with some of the national team programs. They've had a peek at to what it will take to be successful at the next level, to be a professional. And so now we're starting to speak a common language. They understand some of the things that I'm referencing. And then that has really trickled down to some of the other guys. I will say everybody that we have in the gym here has a willingness to learn and comes in with a kind of a curious mindset every day and the ability to make mistakes, to try to be better in the end. But those key guys that have been here before, they have they've really started to drive the process, and it's been great.
All right. So just suffered a bit of a technical difficulty. Hopefully it didn't affect the recording too much. But we were chatting a little bit about your just coming into this team at UBCO and working with an older group. And I guess my assumption would be that it would be a little bit easier to come into a group of younger athletes, second and first years who you could kind of mold to your own, as opposed to coming into, 4th and 5th years who have their own idea and their own habits. Did you find any difficulty in that, of kind of working with older athletes, or were you, I guess, lucky in a sense to have the athletes that you did and who were able to buy into your ideas and your trainings, from the get-go?
Yeah. I think you're right on, right? You would like to come into an experienced group because the guys, know a little bit more, but on the flip side, sometimes that can be a difficult situation because they know more, because they have more experience, right? So these guys here, personality wise, were really open-minded, like they didn't know me. They had really, no reason to trust me, until I kind of proved myself a little bit. But they were really willing right from the beginning to, the first day of practice, last year, I think back to when I came in August, our first day of practice, we started with things like, playing balls out of the net, like digging the ball to yourself and setting it, right? Like just basic fundamental skills. And, for me, the part of that was to, just to have a bit of an assessment to see what the guys, see what the guys could do, see what their understanding of the game was. But that's, that stuff's not terribly exciting, right? And those guys gave me the benefit of the doubt, and we started to see some growth, in some of these small ball control activities. But, as an athlete, it's hard to see the value in, setting a high ball, 8 times out of 10 versus 5 times out of 10, right? And that's kind of where we started, right? But within that, I made sure to dialogue with these guys, how you feel and do you understand why we're doing it? And I think for me, that was one of the keys was really providing them with the why. Like when I played, I really wanted to understand why we were doing some things, and once I understood that, then I was able to sort of grasp onto it, and I was willing to give it my all. I played in a bunch of different places in Europe, and you have language and beliefs, and coach education is different everywhere, so we did a lot of drills when I was in Europe, and I'm like, well, this is weird. I don't understand why we're doing this. But as soon as the coach said, no, this is why we're doing it. And so that's where I started. I said, here's what we're going to do, and here's why, right? And then making sure that we had enough benchmarks along the way that we were able to see the progress. And from there, we were just gradually able to add different layers onto it, from the basic skills. We got to, the basic sort of ball control thing. Then last year we didn't really work on any block defense at all, but we got from our basic ball control to sort of offensive things. It's a little bit more fun. And then we kind of engaged in that process that way. But I was very purposeful, making sure that these guys have their own experience, and it's not just me telling them what to do. I need to recognize all the work that they've put in, that's gotten them to this point. And then we've been able to build that dialogue, since then.
So you didn't work on block defense at all last year?
Well, it wasn't one of our primary things. We had only, we had let's say the framework of a system, but there's only so many hours in a week. And, there were different areas that I felt we needed to invest in. We had some guys that were good blockers. Yeah, we just kind of rolled with it.
Because you guys, it seems like defense has been your identity so far this season. You lead the Canada West in digs per set. You lead the Canada West in blocks per set. And it seems to be something that you guys hang your hat on, and it has won you some matches over the course of this season so far.
Yeah, 100%. It was the number one focus of our team this year. So from day one this year, we started working on block defense. So it was kind of like a 2-year project when I had it last year. Last year, we had to raise the fundamental skills and the offensive side of the ball. And this year, from the first day I got back, I spent a lot of time in Gatineau this summer, and Dan understands block defense. Dan Lewis, understands block defense like few in the world. And I spent a lot of time with him, conversations, watching film, dialogue back and forth. And when we came back, that's been our principal focus. And and it's showing.
Yeah, that's incredible. It really goes to show how building up brick by brick really goes a long way.
Yeah. It's hard, right? You think, at the university level, you think, we're training every day, 3, 4, 5 days a week, but you times that by 2 hours, 10 hours is a lot of time, but it's not an enormous amount of time. And there's so many things, and you divide that 10 hours by however many players you have, by however many skills you want to work on, and if you try to put too much in there, then all of a sudden that number that was not that big to begin with becomes a really small number, like if you sprinkle a little bit over there. So we were really purposeful to try to make sure that we got enough time on task so that we could see a little bit of progress.
Was there kind of a recognition that, we do have all of these upperclassmen, we do have guys who are in their 4th and 5th year, if there's ever been a time for us to make a big impact and kind of show the change in this program, it would be now?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I said that to the guys last year when I got here, 5 years seems like a lot of time, but then, you get to year, 3, 4, 5, and you're starting to wonder, all right, I'm almost at the end, and then, but by year 4, you're like, geez, there's not a lot of road left, right? That's the approach that I always had, when I played, and I have that same sort of mindset when I coach, like if we're in here, it sounds cliche, right? Everybody says it, but we have this hour and a half, or we have this 2 hours, right? Which isn't a lot of time. We have to make the most out of this, right? And if we take, the idea of it's a long, pick your period of time, man, it's going to be a long practice. It's a long week. It's a long month. It's a long season, right? If we have that mindset, then sometimes we don't value time, as the commodity that it is, and we may not get the most out of that, whatever you want to call it, exercise, drill, rep, and if we don't, we'll always wonder, where we could have got, right? So yeah, I don't want to say that it's like a scarcity mindset, but I want to make sure that when we're in the gym, we understand that, these opportunities this isn't like a decades long thing, your university experience.
No, definitely not. It feels like it goes by so fast.
Totally. Yeah.
I mean, even now I'm like 33 years old and it feels like it was yesterday, and it really wasn't. I'm getting old over here. So I'm just curious to know, what was it about UBCO that you wanted to take that program? Because, is in arguably one of the most, it's in the most dense province for volleyball in the Canada West. You've got 3 other teams there in BC, and it doesn't have the most storied history of volleyball excellence either. So what was it that motivated you to go and apply for this job and ultimately become the head coach?
Well, I was at, 2024, it was a bit of an unprecedented year, like in terms of Canadian volleyball, in terms of the number of coaching opportunities that all became available within the same, I don't know, maybe 8 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, right?
UBCO, Calgary, Mac, all on the table all at once. Brock as well too, I guess.
Yeah. New Brunswick women, Larry McKay retired. Volleyball Canada was hiring at the NEP. There was a whole bunch of different positions available, and so that just sort of coincided with where I was, in my professional career, and when I stepped away from coaching the women's national team, I'd always hoped to get back to coaching full time, and there was a few different opportunities, but this one just seemed like it would be a good fit. The community here in the Okanagan, Kelowna, the university, the guys, it seemed like it would be a good challenge and a good fit for the family. And yeah, fortunately it worked out. I thought these guys were really, really close. Like I said before, sometimes the record doesn't reflect what you have, and that the season before I got here, like if as part of the process before I came here, I was, taking a look at some of those things, and I think this team was really, really close. Like you get a couple 5-setters that don't go your way early in the season, and those things can stack one way or the other way, right? So this was a really talented athletic group. I didn't know them as people, but from the outside, you could see that they were a really talented and athletic group, and that made it attractive as well.
Fair enough. I mean, like the Okanagan has been a really nice hotbed for volleyball recently. And I mean, some of those guys, like Seb Emanuel and Tyth Weststraight are guys who grew up in Kelowna. They played together at KSS, and it must be nice to be able to just look down the road. I mean, up and down, you've got Vernon there, you've got guys like Finn McCarthy who come from the area. So it does have such a really good volleyball legacy in that area. Is that something that you're going to really emphasize on, is having an impact in the area and, reaching out to the clubs throughout the Okanagan and the schools to try to convince people to stay in the Okanagan and go to UBCO and play for you?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big part of who I am. Even when I was all of the previous jobs I had, and even going back to professional, right? Like when you play pro, you realize that your club is part of that community, and you have a responsibility to your community. The volleyball community here is really, really strong, as you mentioned, right? So, and that's something I really enjoy doing. This year we launched a program for grade 4 and grade 5, right? So we're getting all of the school age kids started, and we also started a program in the spring. It was for like university and post-secondary guys who are here in the summer. We started like an elite league, right? So the demand for volleyball here is huge. As you mentioned, there's a lot of great players that have come from here. We hosted a game with Thompson Rivers and the coach at KSS, Mike Sedero. Between the two teams, he had 14 guys between our team and Thompson Rivers played at KSS. And those are guys that are currently playing. So that's in a 5-year window. Like, that's nuts, man. Volleyball is really popular here. Gord Perrin, when he's here, he's away now playing pro, but he lives in the area. Freddie Winters lives in the area. Danny Smith lives around here. Brittany Page, so there's lots of old volleyball players around here, who are willing to, to contribute to the growth. So it's a cool environment, and I'm really enjoying it, because it's the game is more than 20 matches we play in Canada West. Like it's about what you said, right? It's about getting involved with the provincial teams and the schools and going to the club practices and stuff. And I really, really enjoy that. And the guys are starting to enjoy that too. So it's cool. Like that brand recognition must also be really important with you guys. When you have to compete with powerhouses like Trinity Western and UBC, who are in the province, more or less down the road, to be able to try to convince some of these top level players to stay at home. Yeah, it is for sure. And that's part of like the, like my education of the region. I'd been to Kelowna twice prior to taking the job here, right? Like if you've got family here, if you've been out here a couple times, I would say it's an underappreciated city. Yeah. You can go down, like right now, this time of year, actually, you can go down on the waterfront. They have They have an outdoor skating rink by the marina. The lake is still there. So it's a really unique place that has really strong academics. UBC, the institution is set up here, so it's high academic standards. But not a lot of people have been here, and not a lot of people really understand a lot about what it is. So that's been a big priority, for us too, is trying to spread the word, educate people that this is an opportunity, because you're right, we don't have the brand recognition of those other programs, but we hope that we're able to do that, and we know that we can offer a pretty good experience for young volleyball players.
Now, speaking of those two programs, you do have dates lined up with both of them looking into the new year. I mean, I'm pretty sure you've got Trinity Western first thing coming in, or second thing coming in into January, and then you close out your regular season with UBC. So those are two of the biggest powerhouses in the country. You've also got MRU and Calgary coming up to close out the year. How important is it to be able to continue that momentum that you've created in the first half of the season and really put a good fight against two perennial powerhouses who are going to be looking to go back to nationals once again?
Yeah, I mean, Alberta, UBC, and Trinity, year after year, like that's the standard, right? For the last decade or more, you know what I mean? So ultimately, if you want to do anything in this league year, you're going to have to get through, one or two or three of those teams, right? So we're really looking forward to that. We played Trinity in the preseason. We played UBC in the preseason, and we were satisfied with what we were able to do. We weren't able to win either of those matches. So, those ones are obviously really, really important for us. And last year we went to Calgary, and Calgary handed it to us pretty good. That's fresh in our mind. And, and Mount Royal is having a pretty solid season too, right? In the upper half of the standings. So yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge, like this big break in the middle. You never really know how it's going to go. When you come out, you hope you have a pretty good idea that you can get back on track. But these young guys here with exams and all, after the big haul we had in the first half with 12 matches and the travel and exams and Christmas and things like that, right? We want to make sure that we get back and get it started the right way. And you hope you can, but you never really know, right? So we're fortunate that we have a little bit of a cushion, from the work that we did in the first half. But going back to what I had said earlier about standards, that part is past, like that's just a representation of the work that we've done, and we have to be willing to really, really commit to the fact that, we have 8 games in the second half of the season here, and we have 0 wins and 0 losses, like it sounds cliche, but that's really, really how we have to approach it. What we've done, it's nice what we've done, but we want to do more.
Fair enough. I mean, you yourself coming from Winnipeg, having played and coached at Manitoba, there's always that innate rivalry between Manitoba and Winnipeg, all within the same city and back and forth. Is there that same desire to, create a rivalry with the UBC? You are within like the same ecosystem academically. UBC and UBCO are essentially the same institution, just 2 different campuses. Is there a desire to kind of go and stick it to Big Brother in a certain way?
Well, I think, it's kind of interesting here, like in BC in general, right? Because, we have a bit of a rivalry with all the schools, Thompson Rivers, because of the proximity, and the guys, a lot of Kelowna guys play there. So that has something special, and then, Trinity and UBC because of what they've been able to accomplish, and Fraser Valley. There's a lot of guys from here that play at Fraser Valley as well, but specifically as it relates to UBC, yeah, I think it's, sort of throughout the athletic department here and the institution, where we're proud of what we share, but there's a lot of success and there's a lot of tradition, with the Thunderbirds that we just haven't had here yet, right? So part of it is building what we want to build, and there is something, any team here, whether it's basketball, volleyball, golf, a victory, over the other campus is something big. It's important.
Yeah. And it also must be important for just like that, brand recognition with potential recruits too, being totally able to go there and be like, hey, look, we split with Alberta this year. We split with UBC, or we beat UBC this year, helps those kids kind of cock their head over and look over like, hey, maybe UBCO is a possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Ultimately, you're measured by how you stack up against the competition in your league, right? And those ones are always in the top top half of the list. And, ultimately we'd like to get into that top half of the list, on an annual basis. But we would also like to be at the top of the list for athletes and student athletes that are looking for a great experience. So I agree 100%.
I mean, I can attest, if you like mountains, if you like the outdoors, if you like temperate winters, the Okanagan is a nice place to be.
Yeah, it is for sure. It is for sure. You got to bring, one of those little blue light things, because in the valley, the cloud sort of settles in. So there's sometimes not always a lot of sun here in the wintertime, but yeah, you know what it is? It is a really unique place, and it combines a lot of cool stuff, right? The outdoor, the education, the athletics, the community. I'm finding out it's a good place to be.
Yeah. Do you live there full time now? Did you make the move completely to the Okanagan, or do you?
Summer, I was here. I was in Gatineau. I was Winnipeg, and then we still have a cottage in Kenora, so northwestern Ontario.
Of course, Lake of the Woods area, great spot.
Yeah, it's Lake of the Woods. It's lake country, but a little different lake country than here. I would say most of my stuff is here year round, but I also have stuff in Winnipeg, and I didn't leave anything in Gatineau, but it was split traveling around a little bit. But I think we'll for the next little bit, we'll spend some time most of the season here, but we will go back to Winnipeg and cottage country during the summer.
Are you a fishing guy? Do you go out in Lake of the Woods and try to catch those muskie?
I wish. I'm a terrible fisherman. Yeah. I got like the $35 Canadian Tire fishing rod, and I think the only thing we've caught is like 2 jack off the dock, and even at that, I didn't even know what to do with it when we caught it. Thankfully, it shook itself off the hook, so I didn't really have to deal with it. But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of people on the lake that are good fishermen, and I kind of tag along with them. But I myself, I'm not there yet.
Yeah, no, the last time I was in Kenora, which was quite a while ago. I had a buddy who was big into fishing, and he'd be like, "Hey, just come out." So I went out for the beers. And while he was fishing, so it was, and I mean, beautiful country up there. As Lake of the Woods is gorgeous. So many nice islands to going around and stuff like that. So you can have a great time just sitting on the dock drinking a few cold ones while everyone else is fishing.
Yeah, exactly. I'll bring the sandwiches. And the refreshments, and somebody else can bring the tackle and the bait and that sort of stuff. So,
have you played and coached with Garth for a long time? Are you part of that Garth Pischke, Volleyball Manitoba, Volleyball Canada rum culture? Are you a rum guy?
Yeah, no, not really. Different kind of rum.
No,
you know what I mean? Like those guys are more of a Malibu type rum. I'd be a little more of the the spiced rum kind of thing. Although around Christmas time, it does shift a little bit more to spiced rum, even in Manitoba. You're right.
Early in my career working for Volleyball Canada, I was working with John Blatcher quite a bit. Yeah. And it did seem like we ended up in his hotel room after events quite often, drinking some rum. So actually, when you were coaching at Manitoba in Garth last year, right as the world was shutting down for COVID, I had come down for nationals, and I did, a farewell interview with Garth. Yeah. When originally, when the tournament was supposed to be played, of course, everything had shut down because of COVID. So I went and did an interview with Garth, and I got him a nice little bottle of rum before that too. I was kind of hoping he would have opened it there and shared some of it with me. Would have maybe I think that would have made it a real fun interview if Garth and I shared a little bit of rum before we chatted. But it was still a good time chatting with him.
Oh yeah. He's a great individual. And when we went to Manitoba, we opened our season in Manitoba this year, and so I asked him to come out. So if you've spent a little bit of time in Winnipeg, along with the rum, there's a couple of Italian places called Sorrento's. So you got I don't know if it used to be downtown near U of W, but anyways. So we had Garth over to the hotel, and we ordered the classic, the Sorrento's meal, and I had him speak to the guys. I thought it was, I talk about him a lot, and he's someone that's there was really, I spent a lot of time with him as a player, and I still go back a lot of the stuff as a coach now, and it was really cool to spend some time with him and have him talk to the guys a little bit. So it was, we didn't go down those rum stories, but he has a lot of wisdom to share, and it was awesome to see him again and catch up.
I mean, one of all the greatest of all time. We will talk about Garth quite a bit in a little bit. Don't Don't get me wrong. But
Okay, well,
before we do,
sorry.
yeah, but no, it's all good. Before we do that, though, I just want to know, kind of, was nationals a goal for this team at the beginning of the season, and is it a goal now, given the start of the year that you guys have had?
Yeah, it was a goal. It was a goal at the beginning of the season. With the age of the guys that we had, fourth and fifth year guys don't want to hear that we're on a 3 or a 4 year plan. Like, hey, we're going to get there. We're going to get there, right? We put some things in place last year. We took some great steps forward, and we wanted to perform. Whether we get there or not, I don't know, but that's the goal, right? Be the best that we can be at the top of Canada West, and get ourselves a shot at nationals. And yeah, that's part of building culture. It was a different era. When I played, the leagues were different, but at U of M, there was never a schedule that we didn't get at the beginning of the year that didn't have nationals on it. When Garth handed out that first piece of paper, right, our season went, from whenever it was in September until whenever it was in March, right? And yeah, that's kind of what I've tried to bring here, right? Lots of stuff happens in between then, but you can't be afraid to talk about it. You know what I mean? And you might as well put it up there as the ultimate goal.
Fair enough. If you're not planning for it, you can't be ready for it.
Exactly. Yeah. And you'll never. That's part of the learning process, right? Like we talk about that this year, right? Hey, we can't be afraid. We can't be afraid to lose. We've been in a couple situations, where we were down. First match of the year in Manitoba, we were down in the fifth set. Thompson Rivers were down in the fifth set. Brandon, we were down in the fourth set, right? And that's something that I kind of picked up from Glenn, in some of these timeouts. He's like, hey, listen, we are where we are. We can't be afraid of this. Like, we're not in a good spot. Losing is a real possibility here, unless this happens and this happens. And, this is what we can control. So let's do that. And, and it's been a cool process seeing how these guys kind of evolve with that.
Well, it sounds like you've really bought into the whole community and coaching at UBCO. And I mean, if you guys do end up making a trip to nationals, that is also one of the best recruiting tools as well. When a lot of those club kids, they see those 8 teams at nationals, and they're like, hey, these are the schools that I want to go to. So, I wish you guys the best.
Without question.
Yeah. I wish you guys the best of luck. It's been a fun road to watch so far. I can't ever say until this year I've ever sat down and watched a UBCO match. And now I will admit, I don't watch U Sports nearly as much as I did back when I was single and in my 20s, and use it as my pre-drinking on the TV. And now that I have a partner and stuff like that, I don't watch as much ball, but still, my volumetrics on Monday mornings is definitely rolling a lot more UBCO than it used to. Now, I do want to talk about your playing career a little bit. You've mentioned quite a few of the coaches that you've played under before that. I have something to show you, and I want to know if you recognize this.
Man, oh man.
So this is your jersey from the 2006 World Championships in Japan. I bought it from the Volleyball Canada auction in like 2007 or 2008. So it's your jersey with the felt number and all, and it's signed by the entire team. It's got, Koskie on the back as well here.
Yeah, those were that's a heavyweight polyester, that one. Hey.
Oh yeah, this is like if the guys were forced to wear these Mizuno jerseys, and I mean in all fairness, everyone had these Mizuno jerseys at the time, right? Japan had similar jerseys, Russia had similar jerseys, the US had similar jerseys, but yeah, this is a game worn jersey as well. When I got it, there was still sweat on it. No, not actually, but.
Man, you're 16 on there. Paul Durden, Dan Lewis, Terry Martin. Yeah, wow.
Yeah. So
Freddie Winters. Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. Freddie Winters, headband Winters back in the day, back when he was wearing the headband. But just like a little story for you, the first time I ever saw international volleyball, or really any volleyball that wasn't the AVP on TV, I went to the Anton Forlani Cup in 2006 in Ottawa.
In Ottawa.
Yeah. Where you guys, when they split up, like Cuba ended up not coming, and they split up. There was Canada 1 and Canada 2, and you guys played against Tunisia and Argentina. And I originally wanted to go to the Saturday matches, but we couldn't because my buddy that I wanted to go to was trying out for competitive hockey. So my parents were like, well, why don't we go to the Friday night matches? And we went to the Friday night matches, and, I was running around watching the game. That was, I had played 1 year of grade 8 volleyball the year before. Wasn't quite at this level, of course. And, had loved it. And was, running around the arena, was at the VSP booth, and I had this woman come up to me and be like, how old are you? And I told her, I'm 13. And she goes, oh, well, perfect. Or 14. And she's like, perfect. You can try out for my 15U team tomorrow morning. So I went from watching you guys play on the Friday night and then went to my first club volleyball tryout on the Saturday, and 10 guys showed up for 12 spots. Thank God, there's only 12 of them, or 10 of them, because I don't know if I would have made the team. And that's how I started playing volleyball, because, it was a very different experience getting to see the national team play in person as opposed to, you couldn't even watch volleyball on TV. That was really my first, exposure. And then fast forward, to that summer, I got to see you guys play against Brazil in Mississauga in the World League. And almost 20 years later, here I am, still plugging away. So yeah, watching you guys back in the fall of 2006 is really what kickstarted my love for the game.
Yeah. That was a really cool event because that was what's it called now? Canadian Tire Center. Like we were in the big rink. Like it was huge. Yeah. It was it was amazing. Yeah, that's and then the World League things, always going through there in Ontario, with quite regularly we played Brazil in there, right? And just great crowds and great fans, and it was cool to contribute to the development of the game, and that's awesome. I don't know, that might have been a recruiting violation though, no? Like someone recruiting you at the game like that? Was that within the recruiting window?
Well, I don't know. Well, I don't know if there's any of those regulations back in the day. Once again, I'm aging myself a little bit for the young guys who watch my channel, but this was 2006. Okay. So I don't know if there was that many other things there. And I'm pretty sure, because at the time it was the Kangaroos and the Mavericks, the two clubs in Ottawa.
Kangaroos?
Even like there was someone from the Kangaroos and someone from the Mavericks. And they asked me where I lived, and I said Barhaven. They're like, okay, you're more West End. You should talk to the Roos. And that's how we got things kicked off. But yeah, I still remember that, because like on the A team, like Chris Wolfenden was the libero, you were setting, Durden was on the right side. The left side was Winters and Terry Martin was playing. You had Brinks and Grappentine down the middle as well too. The B team was full of guys like, I think Mike Monday was setting. Dodds was playing for that team. Yeah, Sunius was playing for that team. Howie played for that team.
Yeah.
Meehan, Alex Gaumont Cassius, Louis Pierre Mainville. Like it was really like an eye-opening, and that was right at the beginning of the Glenn era too. And you guys were getting ready for the World Championships, and little did I know where I'd be almost 20 years later. But even when you guys played Brazil, like that was the Brazil team with Ricardinho setting and Jiba and Dante and all those guys. I want to go back to first year Manitoba days, because you spent quite a number of seasons playing under Garth at Manitoba. Did ended up winning 2 national championships in 91 and 95. Those were the heydays really of Manitoba volleyball. Garth was, undeniably one of the best coaches, not only in the country at the time, but also in North America. He ended up ending as the winningest coach of all time in North American post-secondary, even surpassing Al Skates in wins. So what was it like playing for Garth and that powerhouse Manitoba team back in the 90s?
Yeah. I would say intimidating.
Wow.
When we first started, the first, I would say maybe the first 3 or 4 months. So when I started there, the guys in the gym, so, you'd have to turn back a little bit to get some of these guys, but, Dale Awanashko and Steve Welch and Keith Sanheim. We had Jason Gard, Peter Strolius. I never played with Russ Paddock, but he was, if you know Russ at all, he's a big, scary, intimidating guy.
Yeah.
At the time, way back then, there was we had this Danish guy, Soren Pedersen, who was on the team, big 6'7" outside hitter, and so it was intimidating. You came into that gym there, you had Garth, obviously, who at the time was not only a good coach, but still was a physical specimen, hitting 53s in warm up and stuff like that. So that was crazy. And then the University of Winnipeg team was also good at that time, right? So just entering volleyball in general at that time was intimidating. But that gym specifically, that was kind of in the middle of their run. They had a real dominant run there from, kind of late 80s until, almost late 90s. It was a decade there where there just a lot of really, really good players went through. So I would say fairly quickly it had to go from intimidating, man, I don't know if I can get to this level, to, well, I better get to this level because the level's not going down at all. It's going higher. So if I want to hang around in here and do more than just set up the net and carry the ball cage up the stairs, I'm going to have to really get to work. And that was a huge formative part for me. It was kind of like, well, if you're here, obviously he must see something in you. And so I've got to get to work to make sure that whatever that was, first of all, I can discover it and then I can build on it.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, it does seem like it was very much a pipeline for the men's national team at the time, especially with, Garth quickly taking over. It's almost seemed like you graduated from the school, then he took over the national team in 96. Was the national team located in Winnipeg before that as well too, when Clément Lemieux was running the program?
Well, I played 1 year in Calgary. So following the 96 Olympics, so it was when the team relocated. So I spent 1 year in Calgary right at the end of that group of guys, Greaves and Gingerra and Steve Smith and all those guys. And then when Garth took over, that's when the program moved to Winnipeg. So I was fortunate enough to overlap a little bit, with Clement and Julien Boucher and those guys, when the center was in Calgary. And then the majority of my time was when it was in Winnipeg, and it came when Garth took over.
What was the attitude and the culture around the national team at the time? Like when you went into Manitoba, was it something that you wanted to do, move on and play for the national team, or was it just something that happened organically?
Totally organically. We like at the time, like you said, right, there wasn't a lot of, it was hard to see international volleyball. Like, the World League was small. It was maybe 8 teams, maybe 12 teams. None of those matches were on TV. Once in a while, you could see something on CBC. I would say it wasn't really at the forefront for a lot of guys. I happened to get lucky in '93. They ran a B team program, and I got selected, and then I went out to Edmonton. We played there for a little bit, so that was kind of my first taste of what volleyball could be like at the next level. Then the next summer I went back in '94 and I got cut. And then when it came around to '95, we had a pretty good year, but I had been cut the year before. And the only reason I was going to try out in '95 is because there was a FISHU Games in 1995. So that was like World Student Games. And I thought, okay, this would be a cool way to go out. We'll do whatever we do. We ended up winning the national title. I thought, okay, I'll go and play in this, World University Games, and then I'll just kind of get on with my life. But because I was a graduating player, you couldn't try out for the University Games team unless you tried out for the A team first. So I'm like, all right, I guess I got to go try out for the A team. So I went and tried out, and I had basically the year before I had been told, well, I think, your year 4, you do some things well, some of these things you don't do very well. I don't know, you might be too old to learn these new things. So I was like, all right, whatever. I went without any expectations, fully expect to just, be released. So I went through the whole tryout process, and I remember I got into my meeting at the University of Calgary. It was with Clement and George Laplante and Bruno Ouellette, the sports psych guy. And I'm like, all right, well, I'll just go, I'll just come in here to take a couple minutes. And we sat down, and Clement was there, and he had his papers and everything, and he looks up and he says, Scott, we're selecting you to the A team. And I'm like, huh. I never I thought it was, I never could have imagined that. And, that meeting, sparked the next 13 years. So, it wasn't anything I really aspired to, but I had the opportunity. And then once I had the opportunity, I was like, all right, well, I might as well make the most of it and see how long I can go with it. But it was crazy, like now, people grow up, they watch it, from a young age, they aspire to it. You can see it online, you can get mentored by everybody. But, back then it was just kind of like poof, kind of came out of nowhere, and away it went.
I mean, even like this was the 90s, like even in the 2000s when I was growing up, if I had never gone to, the Anton
Yeah,
Ferlani Cup,
totally.
it would have just been something that passed me by. Like, I'm not entirely sure if
Yeah.
I don't know if I would have ever played club. Even if I would have played club, I would have never seen the game at that level and known kind of what was possible. And I mean, you guys ended up getting, I think it was 11th at the World Championships that year, and you played against like Argentina and Tunisia. So it's not even like, you guys were playing some of the big teams in the world, but still just having that exposure at such a young age was crazy. Now, when you started being in the gym with a lot of these guys, like the Durdens and, getting coached by some of the big names, were you aware of kind of the success and the pedigree of the program? There was a program that went really well, through the 80s, into 92. And then, from there, things started changing a little bit. Were you aware when you joined about kind of some of the success that had happened throughout the 80s?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there was that was an elite generation of players, right? Like that talent that was on what was on that team, right? But like anything, it takes you a little bit of time to be at that level to really understand the depth of international volleyball and the history of the great players in your own country, but great players like throughout the world. I would say as we got started there, certainly those guys that were still around, Kent, Randy, Steve, Russ, Terry Gagnon, Don Saxton, Gaton, Garth, Stelio. I mean, the list, Glenn just goes, right? But until you see, like you said about seeing the Ferlani Cup, until you actually see what the game can be, you can't develop the appreciation for what it is that you're watching. I don't know if that makes sense, but I remember the first event I went to was the Norseca Championship up in Edmonton, and the Cuban guys were there. And this was Raul Diago, Joel Despain, Osvaldo Hernandez, Ishvani Hernandez, right? And so I don't know if you remember those old videos, so Diago, when he used to serve, he had the tennis yell, like he'd toss it up and he'd spin, he's like, aye, and he's hitting the thing, right? And so you listen to all these guys and you're watching these guys hitting the warm up, and you see Hernandez with the net, whatever. Back in that day, guys could jump, but if you're getting, elbows over the net was the goal, right? And then you go in, you see these Cuban guys that are like legitimately full shoulders over the net, hitting the ball straight down. And you're like, okay, that's what the game can be, right? And then it unlocks a whole nother level of appreciation, right, of what you can do, because you only know for what it is, right? But I remember that vividly, right? That group there. And then, then when we came back, and then in that era, we had the chance to actually, Terry Gagnon and Don Saxton came back, and they trained with us. John Barrett came back and trained with us in preparation for the 96 Olympics. And when Barrett came back, I was coaching with him this summer. He's a great guy, but as a setter, when John Barrett comes into the gym and I had to set him, I was like, it was just another level, man, So
Yeah, I mean,
then you gain the appreciation, right? And these guys were fairly far along in their career, like Sax was, he was retired, Don Saxton, right? And so I remember him talking to me about, he's like, well, when I played with Tom Jones, we had like 5 different 51s. I'm like, huh? He's like, we had the 50, we had the head, we had the float, we had the double float, we had the high, we had the ozone. And I'm like, what? And then, so every time you talk to these guys, you gain an appreciation, and you learn more and more about the game, and then it makes you more curious, right? And it was it was a really cool thing to be a part of.
I mean, you've been a part of so many different stages of the national team too. Like, as you just mentioned, getting the tail end of, one of the golden generations in the 90s. That, I mean, you're dropping so many names that have created, this most recent success, in the 2010s and now into the 2020s. But after that, you were on the national team a little bit with Clément Lemieux, and then, with Garth from like 96 to 2000. Then you had the Stelio Duraco days. And then you also got like just the beginning of the Glenn Hoag days. Now, through, from like 96 to 2007-ish, what were some of the difficulties in playing for the national team and surrounding the national team at the time?
Well, I would say at that time, because the game was funded a little bit differently, like there were it was hard. It was hard for Canada to compete because of how expensive it was. You used to have to foot the bill. Like back in the day, if you wanted to play international matches, like you had to tour. Like you had to go to Europe and you had to go around and tour and play a bunch of games against France and Spain and all that sort of stuff, right? Where these European countries could do it quite easily. The Americans had more resources, so they were able to do it somewhat consistently. But I would say, the biggest obstacle was in order to get good at the game. So when I started, around that early 90s there, like there was only a handful of guys that were even playing pro. Greaves was playing pro, Gingera, Gino Brousseau, Sanheim a little bit, right? These guys were playing some pro. John was playing pro. But that wasn't the norm. We were based in like a full-time training center model. Thankfully back in the day, the $1,500, if you had 4 guys, could get you an apartment in Calgary and and a reasonable amount of food if you were smart. But it was hard, and then those competitive opportunities were few and far between, right? And I think that would be the challenge. And then as the FIVB progressed the game into World League and things like that, like it was a big expensive venture to play in World League, and we had some really brave people involved with Volleyball Canada who were willing to invest lots of money and take on lots of debt from the national sport organization to provide us with the opportunity. And so that was the challenge. But then, you always wanted, you never, kind of like I said before, but never wanted to take anything for granted. Like one of the things that Glenn said was, hey guys, like your opportunities are being funded by the people that are getting up and going to work every day. So, you have to treat this with the level of respect that it deserves. Like this is taxpayer money that's helping you play a sport, right? And so I think financial was the biggest challenge, but along with that, I think the benefit was the accountability, right? The innate accountability that it built in you and the national pride, So, and once we got rolling a little bit with some of those opportunities, we were able to hang there. We could hang with the American guys, and we could hang with some of the Dutch teams and the Brazilian teams and things like that. But for us, we could never quite get over the hump, we were good. We just couldn't quite get there. But the process of trying to get there was awesome.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, in terms of that competition, I remember because my first summer working for Volleyball Canada was in 2011. And that was the summer we qualified for World League. And it was a big, long process. Had to get through the, Pan Am Cup first. And then there was a couple of qualifying rounds after that. And I remember hearing Glenn and Vincent Pichette just obsess over needing to qualify because it would start getting them into the World League where they could get that continuous competition level and see the level of the game. Because at the time, Canada, like I grew up after getting to see World League in 2007, which kind of bankrupted Volleyball Canada, unfortunately, paying for CBC to broadcast those games. It was really only like there was a few tours against Australia where they brought Australia through or they brought Cuba through, but that was once again on the bank of Volleyball Canada. Volleyball Canada was paying for all that, so that competition was huge. Now you were with the team. I guess you kind of saw 2 transitions. From Calgary to Winnipeg, and then were you there when the team moved to Gatineau when Glenn took over? No, okay.
Not as a player, no.
Okay, fair enough. So you were still but you still played for Glenn a little bit because Glenn coached in that like 2006 World Championships.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
At the end of the Winnipeg cycle, Glenn was there. Yeah.
Yeah. Fair enough. So what was Glenn at that point had already had some success in Europe. He had developed one of the best pro teams in Paris and won a Champions League and had been the assistant coach for the French national team for a few years at the very least at that point. What was it like in those early days, and what were some of the things that Glenn established in those early days in Winnipeg that really set the standard and the basis for Team Canada volleyball back then?
Yeah. Well, the first thing was the skill gap, and I had, kind of mentioned that what I've been doing here, like that came from him, like the idea that the skill level that the European players had and have, like when they get to, let's say, even 16, 17 at that time, was really different than what we had. And so the success that he had, in the French league, being so familiar with players, not only from France, but, competing competing in the Champions League, right? So, against the Italians and Poland and Russia and all that sort of stuff, right? So when he got to work with us, it was a lot of it was on the basic. Well, first was physical. We were in great shape. He had some great now when I look back at them, but at the time they weren't that great. Really great physical conditioning, activities. So that, that level, the word he still uses now is physicality, right? Like we needed to build our physical capacity. So we spent a lot of time with that. And then a lot of, basic skill execution, like I mentioned before, like, the difference of setting a high ball that can be hit, let's say 8 or 9 times out of 10 versus, 6 or 7 times. You're like, what's the difference of 2 balls, but, on the global scale, and a little bit in youth sports, but on the global scale, where a lot of the sets are 2-point sets, that's where the game's won and lost. Can I hit a block out, or do I have to hit a long skip shot that the guy in 6 can dig and then transition and hit the pipe out of, So he brought that element in. He was the first one to come up with the idea of the full-time training center. So way back in the day in Winnipeg, there was a military base. There was a gym, Lipset Hall. So it was basically the military had moved out and the gym was quite good. And so it was available to us like all day, all summer. And so, we were there 9 to 12, 4 to 7, 9 to 12, 4 to 7 with weights in between, for however long it took to acquire the basic level of skills. Right. And so that's where we started, right at the basic skills. Like we had guys like, like Jason and Paul and Kent and these guys, Breaks, Murray, like these guys were big physical guys, like the physical gap wasn't that big, but the skill gap was big and the conditioning gap was big. And he set out to try to close that gap. And he really, kind of got everything moving in that direction to kind of where it is today.
Do you look back at that time? And, obviously you're very involved now. You've been with the women's national team. You've been with the men's national team. You're coaching youth sports. Do you look back at that time and you look at now and be like, holy crap, like how far have we come since, 2006, since 2007 and, seeing what's happening almost 20 years later?
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's nice now that, that the game is more accessible, like the end product, right? That people can see the end product. Like the grind is still the same, I worked with the next gen team this summer, 16 weeks in Gatineau for 5 matches, so there was some exhibition matches, but whatever it was, official matches, so it's progressed a long way. But like this competition that we went to, as an example, this, the Pan Am Cup that we had, that when I was playing, that was just like, it was just starting. But this event here, when they finished it, it was a really high level competition. They had a podium, they had medals, they had confetti raining down, for an event that was, 20 years ago didn't even exist, so it's cool to see how many opportunities there are for players now throughout the pathway to learn how to train, how to pay the price, and if you're good enough to experience the rewards. It was, 20 years ago, you could do those sorts of things, but we only had money at the senior team level. So we didn't really have a lot of B team money. We had no U21, we had no U19, that sort of stuff, right? So you had to grind a long time in anonymity on the hope that maybe someday you would make it to the senior team and maybe you would see, not that
catch
medals are what you play for. You know what I mean? You're there to get to the Olympics and you're there to win medals. We can't be afraid of calling that what it is, right? And I think that's the biggest change, right? That people at younger ages now, athletes, can see that cycle. When you can see that cycle through to its completion, even if it's not at the senior team level, it just helps. It just helps in the growth. Like I think it's I was lucky to coach a couple of times at the girls, U18 World Championships. Like you're taking 17 female club athletes from Canada, against Italian pros. Like it's just such an interesting dynamic, and but to have that opportunity is really, really cool.
Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself here in what I want to talk to you about, because there's a few more Team Canada questions that I want to ask you specifically. But you brought up, working with the junior national team, the U19 team for the women. Was that the first in 2019? Was that the first time Canada had a junior women's program?
No, it wasn't the first time they had the program. It was the first time they'd been to the World Championships in, I don't know,
Okay.
like 20 years or something.
Fair enough. So, you talked about that, a little bit earlier, and now, I think recently we just sent a U17 team to
Hmm.
go compete at a Norsika Championships, and unfortunately, they just narrowly missed out of qualifying for the World Championships. But how important is it for these Canadian youth to see that international level of play, whether it's Norsika or World Championships or whatever it may be? How important is it for them to see, that level of play at a young age and really open up their mind to what is out there on the international stage for volleyball?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think yeah, it's huge. You know what I mean? At any level, it's big. I would say it's harder for us to realize at that age. Like you only know what you know, right? So your high school, your provincial high school landscape. Then your national club landscape, maybe. If you travel there. But for those players that are starting to rise to the top, it's important to see the different volleyball elements, but it's also important to see the different cultural elements, because that really helps understand. We play it here, and maybe this is true, maybe it's not true, but it's a game. Like
Yeah.
we go to tournaments, we bring the Gatorade and the coolers. We compete, but we have it's a game. And then when you get to that level of competition, that international, like it's still a game, but for a lot of these countries, it's a lifestyle. Like it's an opportunity to unlock something more. And
They treat it like we treat hockey.
exactly. And to have the opportunity to put the flag of your country, on your chest, on your tracksuit, on your backpack, and go compete. There's really nothing like that, and it's a reward, but it's also a motivator. And that cycle, not everybody figures that out, right? Sometimes as soon as you get it, like it's like, okay, I've arrived. Really, you've got to the point where you've earned the opportunity to do this cycle, which then gives you the opportunity to do it again and again and again and again and again. But you don't really get that, in Canada. Like if you're not happy with your club team in Canada, we just go find another club team. You know what I mean? Like you don't really grind out, not everybody, but a lot, that you don't really grind out with what you have, and really work and really build, right? And that's, I think, what it teaches the younger players, right? And having that opportunity.
Now, as you mentioned at the time back when you were playing, there's not many Canadians who are going out to play pro. And I mean, I remember even when the national team training center started back in Gatineau, those early days in Gatineau, there was guys, like Dustin Schneider or Adam Simak who were training year round in Gatineau and then, playing on the A team. There was only a handful of
Yeah.
guys playing professionally, whereas, I think it's something like 120 or 140 Canadian men who are playing professionally this year, which is incredible to think of that growth. That's why there's so many times when, I have a Discord server, which is very international, that I run through Volleyball Source. And I've got a lot of internationals who kind of like poke fun at Canada sometimes. And they'll be like, oh, Canada will never make a semifinals of the Olympics. And I was like, maybe we will, or maybe we won't. But just the fact that we've qualified for 3 straight Olympics, just the fact that there's guys who are playing in the best leagues in the world with the best teams is so much further along than I ever could have imagined in the 2010s.
Yeah.
But for you, you had the opportunity to play professionally. You played quite a bit in Spain, a little bit in Austria. Mostly finished your career in France. Were you able to kind of go get those experiences and bring them back to the national team as you did that, as you came home in the summers to play for the Maple Leaf?
Yeah, absolutely. And both, volleyball wise and life wise, like I think, yeah, the very first year that I played pro, after traveling overnight, I landed, and the president of the club came to my apartment in the morning, like was in the apartment and like knocking on the door, but like my bedroom door, like not the apartment door, like because I was rooming with these other guys. So he was already in the apartment, knocked on the bedroom door, and so I'm like, and he's like, hey, welcome. Here's the deal. We're having difficulty finding a coach. You have some national team experience. Would you be the head coach of the team as well? And I'm like,
Wait,
wow.
this is your first club contract?
First club contract, first year. Yeah. Oh, like I'd been to Europe a couple times with the national team. It was like maybe my third time in Europe. Right. So I'm like, sure. And so, there were so many things, from that start, right? So many different things learning, about volleyball, about life, like playing with guys, like I played with guys from, former Yugoslav Republic and things like that, just the different perspectives that they have on everything. But yeah, bringing all that stuff back each summer and then sharing it, hearing from all the other guys what their experiences were. It was really, you're away for half the year, but it was quite a global, lifestyle. And it was really, really essential. Like, I mean, to understand what it takes to compete and enjoy that process, both personally and professionally. So yeah, that was cool. When you came back in the summertime, it was always funny to hear the stories of guys, like we'd play against somebody and, someone would have played with this guy on this national team and, would have stories about whatever it was, that this guy did during the pro season. So it just helped to understand, because oftentimes, you don't speak the language. There's not a lot of familiarity, but it just adds a whole nother layer to the experience, which was kind of cool.
Do you have any stories from those pro days that you can share with us? Anything that kind of sticks out?
Well, I would say there was two, and then for me, formatively, the first one was we were playing in Japan at World Cup, and again, this was '95. So again, like the first time I was really involved there, and so we were in between sets, and at that time, I think at this event in Japan, they always had like a band, they created a band that went around and played at all these after the second set. Every time Japan played, that was part of the whole cultural thing, blah blah blah. But at the event, they always had a break after the second set. So we were waiting, and again, it was a Cuban story. So the Cuban team was playing, and in between the two sets, the guy from, one of the famous players, last name was Sarmiento, so he was just coming to the end, but he was another famous guy before Diego and Despain and that. And so in between the sets, full jersey, fingers taped and everything, he's outside having a smoke. And so there was a couple of moments like that where you're like, man, I want to be athletic, I want to be a healthy lifestyle, and you see, you see that, and then the guy would go out and still perform. And then when I was playing pro, we were in the locker room, and there was a guy. So the coach, didn't want the guys to smoke, even though he knew they all smoked. Didn't want them to smoke like in the locker room. He's like, guys, just don't smoke in the locker room. So we we get into the locker room and it's before the game, and the guys, these three guys decide they want to smoke, and so they go to the bathroom, and three of them are in the bathroom stall smoking together. But it's a bathroom stall, like you can smell the smoke and everything, right? And so the coach comes in, as North Americans, we're whatever fear the coach and stuff, right? And like, what's gonna happen, right? And he came in and he was like, guys, yeah, come on, not in the locker, So, anyways, it was just the whole idea, of like our idea of, what sport involved and what sport actually was, like you had to work hard, but you still had to be able to enjoy the things that you wanted to enjoy. Yeah, it was really eye-opening, as a young player. And then as you go on, whatever it was, you're putting your shoes and the guy beside you smoking or something, you're like, hey, can you just blow the smoke over there if you don't mind, so. Yeah, it's a bit of a different world. Yeah,
that's so wild, especially from a North American perspective. When I was younger, you could smoke in bars, but it was still smoke is smoke. It's going to travel. But now where you can't even smoke, within 15 feet of a door. Like the idea that these guys are just in there hacking darts in the change room before a game, just going at it is wild. I mean, like similarly, I remember a few years ago, Canada played some pre-VNL matches against France, and it's at the center in Gatineau, and I look out and there's like Gianni and Engapeth and a bunch of the big French guys who are fresh off an Olympic championship, going to win another gold medal, just like hacking darts before the games. And it was the same thing when we hosted Brazil back in 2012 too. Like the amount of international guys who just love smoking cigs before games is pretty crazy. And then on the flip side, like, could you imagine if you were in there smoking cigarettes, before Glenn comes in for his pre-game talk? Like, I could just imagine the look on especially back in those days, late 2000s, early 2010s, Glenn, seeing you with a cigarette before a game, like his eyes would pop out of his head and you'd be off the team so quickly.
Oh man, yeah, totally different world. Yeah, but I mean, that's the other thing you realize, right? There's lots of different ways to have success, right? And part of it, I think a lot of the European guys had, they would master the art of working hard when they needed to work hard, Like I was playing maybe just one, well, actually one more, because this was this because as Canadians we're trained to work hard all the time, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So so we were in training, and I was playing with this one guy, and so he's a middle guy, and he was kind of playing for a contract, and so I'm of the idea that, well, we have practice for 2 hours, we're going to work as hard as we can, and but a lot of the guys, not a lot, but a few, had figured out that I didn't have to work that hard, like if the coach isn't really looking. I just got to work hard, like when the coach is looking, like when it's my moment to work hard. So we were doing this 6-on-6 drill, and it gets hard, right? As a middle, you get like a million jumps and everything like that, right? So the guy, he says to me, he's like, Scotty, he's like, listen, I'll come hard on a 51 unless I go like this. And if I wiggle my eyebrows, I'm coming, but don't set me, I'm not jumping. Don't make me look bad. So I'm like, oh, okay. At first I'm like, what? How do you not, like in our university environment, like, listen, man, you got to jump 500 times to get 2 balls, right? But, then I learned about it, and that's part of, I think part of understanding, the game, right? Is everybody wants to be successful, but I have to be, I have to learn how to work with people, right? Like, and I can't take that. Listen, man, you're going to go hard every time, and you'll set when I give you. I'm like, no, okay, I get it. But so yeah,
Man,
it was a cool evolution, though. You know what I mean? Like learning that, because that's the reality. You're there for 8 months. You know what I mean? You can't go 100% every practice every day. Like it's just not possible.
especially too, like it's even more clear now, but if you're playing on the national team in the summer, you are doing this 11, 12 months of the year. Like you are competing week in and week out all throughout the entirety of the year.
Yeah, the physical demands on these guys now is crazy. You know what I mean? Like the world championships are so big. The VNL schedule is so long. The pro seasons are so long. There's so many opportunities, and I think that was always going to be, the flip side as the global demand for the game grew. And the desire to create more opportunities for content and more opportunities for people to watch it, right? And the game's, evolving like most pro sports. Like once you establish the stars, people want to see the stars perform. And if you go a long time without, because we don't have the pro leagues here, right? If you go a long time, people forget, and the FIVB is committed to, to keeping the game front and center, right? But the physical demands on some of these players is it's crazy.
Yeah, is absolutely huge. Now, I'm curious to know if you had to pick from your days of playing, of the guys that you played with, if you had to pick a starting 7, who would you go with? What's the Team Canada starting 7 from like the 90s and 2000s look like?
Oh man, geez, there were so many guys. I mean, we had
we can go a little over 7 as well too, but still, like what would those teams, like an all-star team of the 2000s or 90s and 2000s, go up against? What would that look like?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's got to start, has to start with Paul, with Durden. He was, of course, he was, I don't think a lot of people appreciate how good he was, on a global scale, because there was an opportunity to see him play, he was certainly one of the best in the world at his time. Jason Haldane, he was a guy that early when I was starting, he really was coming into his own, as a blocker and attacker, and just a guy that was establishing an identity. Gino Brousseau, all around skills, and defense and reading the game and competitiveness. He was a guy that would train at 100% every minute of every day he was at the gym. And that was a really great example. I played a long time with Brinks and Grapper, in the middle. Those 3 guys, that was a pretty solid middle rotation that we had there. But I spent a lot of times peppering with Brinks. Yeah, Terry Martin, Freddie, both just physical specimens, on the outside, were really solid at what they did. Physically we were able to match up. Yeah, it was at that time, right? The physical gap was still quite a bit between a lot of the guys that we had and a lot of guys that some of the other teams had. And then I played, I was lucky to play a couple years with Kent Greaves, and man, he was yeah, he was exceptional, like what he could do. Like I made a point of just watching him and in every situation, and, trying to watch some things that he'd do and realize that I couldn't do that. And like, okay, but I have to try to figure out how to do that. And then I would say the other one was, again, I didn't play with him very much, but we overlapped on a couple competitions with Randy Gingera. And man, the guy was effortless and smooth. Could play on both sides. Could play on the right. Could play on the left. We were at a competition in Cuba qualifying for the World Championships, and he was playing on the left side, and the level of play that he was able to put out in that event, going toe to toe with these Cuban guys, it was crazy. Somewhere around there, and there's a few other, there's quite a few other guys, but that group, some combination of those guys there, we won a lot of important matches and grew a lot as a group, with that group there.
Those are some big names in Canadian volleyball right there. That's a little bit of a who's who. I need to find, I was talking to Preston this summer, and actually I was having a conversation in Quebec City after the week of VNL that had happened, and I was talking to Kent, and I was talking to Jason Haldane, and Preston was there as well. And they were just throwing stories around, and about playing in the Champions League finals and playing together at the time. And I was just sitting there, like, wide-eyed and bushy-tailed, like in heaven a little bit. And Preston was telling me that he still had some video from those days, and I think I need to reach out to him again and see if I can get my hands on that video, because I'd love to be able to see. I mean, I guess too, like, you played through the biggest transition in the game. Like, when you started at Manitoba and you started playing for the national team, you started playing professionally, the game was still side out scoring through 15 with no libero. And then, the second half of your career, all of a sudden you're playing rally point scoring, games to 25, and you're playing with a libero. So how did that transition go? What was that like, trying to get used to it, almost like an entirely new game?
Yeah, that's crazy, actually. We still chat about that a little bit now. Like, there's, every once in a while you can find like a college game on YouTube, with the side out scoring, and I don't know how people used to watch that, man. Like, that's boring, like just hours and hours of side out, right? Like, yeah. And then progressing through the scoring, like, I remember when the fifth set went to rally point, and everybody was like, "Ooh, what's going on here?" You know what I mean? Like, now we play regular sets, but then the fifth is rally scoring, and then
really,
when the serve hit the net, it was a fault, and to now you can play it out, right? We won the national championship in '95. The guy missed the serve on his second toss because he tossed the first one, didn't like it, so you could let it bounce, and you could have two tosses on the serve, right? So
wow.
When the libero came in, I remember the first competition, they didn't really know what to do. So they had the libero was wearing a penny with an L, that didn't go over very well. So they evolved that probably for the better of the position, and everybody wanting to play that position. We dabbled a little bit in this Danish scoring system where it was, I don't know, it was like I forget, it was like 2 sets to 15, and then you had to play a 7-set tiebreak, and that was the half. And then if you won the half, you played the second half. And if you did, it was weird. We experimented with that kind of scoring system. And then the game kind of settled down a little bit. And then it was really cool, to see the evolution of the game. Like you mentioned, that Brazilian team that really, took the game and evolved it to something that nobody could ever have imagined, like Andre and Dante and Jiba and Ricardo and all those guys, like just the speed and the power. And, like you watch, even now, right, you watch some of those clips on Instagram or whatever, right? Like that evolution of the game, the generation of guys that, former Yugoslavia there, Vujovic and Gerbiches and Boscan and those guys, like how they, just the level of skill that they brought to the game. Yeah, it's been really cool, to see how it evolves. And even now, I'm so grateful to still be involved and see how, the game is now played, I don't know, 5-6 inches higher than it was. Still some speed, still some elements of power, and the creativity. When I when I think back from where I started to where it is now, like it's almost unrecognizable, but it continues to evolve, and it's just been I've been really, really grateful and really lucky to have been a part of so much of that, and to see the game and know a little bit about the history and where it came from and where it is.
Is it tough sometimes to try to keep up with the evolutions of the game? Because even when you look at the 2000s and 2010s, having a big opposite was a really big thing. You're going to toss just high balls to the, dish butter, like high balls to the big opposite. Whereas now a smaller, more agile opposite is almost better because of how much like wiping and throwing there is. And you have to be able to be a blocker. You have to be able to be a defender. You have to be able to hit in a fast offense. Like, is it tough to be able to continue to keep up with the level of these transitions in the game?
Well, I kind of like it because I think, as a setter, I was always curious about things. You know what I mean? Like, okay, what can I do? What can I create? There's a certain level of stability and execution that you want, but part of the position is trying things that maybe you had never thought of before, right? So I think it's actually kind of cool, the idea of like, a middle guy doesn't have to be, 6'10", sometimes it helps, but the middle guy can be a little smaller, right? The opposite can receive, right? And, but I mean, if you think back to, in the mid 80s, the US had a lot of success, except they called those guys swing hitters, right? They played with 3 swing hitters and they all received and they could all hit everywhere, right? And so, some of it's not new necessarily. I think it's just, maybe the evolution of the game and the framework that you use to view it through.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I do remember watching you the first time I ever watched you play, of course, back at the Anton Forlani Cup, walking away and being like, oh, okay, cool. So the middles aren't supposed to hit the ball. They're just being used as fakes, because I don't remember I don't remember you setting the middles once. And, you talk about Brinks and Murray Grappentine there.
Yeah.
I kind of walked away feeling a little bad for them. Little did I know that, a few months later I'd be playing middle. But at least, at the time, U15 were running meter balls. So you're getting set a little bit. But yeah, I remember walking away and being like, oh, yeah, you're not supposed to set the middles. They're just there as a decoy,
Exactly. Yeah. They just take up space. Yeah, it's fine. And they'll block once in a while. Yeah. But if they don't block, you get mad at them. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And if they don't jump too, you get mad at them as well. So.
Exactly. Yeah. But both those guys used to get mad at me for being a bad blocker. So, so you gotta help me do my job here. Come on. Yeah. So, yeah.
Was that you? Were you the one? Did you had the towel? You would play with a towel and you'd wipe your hands in between plays?
Yeah. I had. Well, you got the jersey, right? Those jerseys once they got to the certain saturation point, there was no more dry spots on there to wipe your hands off.
But especially too, because now the numbers are sublimated, but what people don't realize is that this is like a felt number, and that's how you know it's like the real Mizuno jerseys. It's not like when I was playing club, but like this is like a felt number, so it slides nicely on the floors. But I could not imagine this thing being soaking wet and this number just sticking to you. Like I never understood why they had the felt number on the back as well too. Like, are you sliding on your back? Like you had the screen printing for the name at the very least, but the felt number on the back. Like this number in itself is probably as heavy as the jerseys are now today.
Towards the end of my career, we started traveling with a physiologist. And so, he was measuring internal temperatures and things like that. And one of the things he would do is like pre-match and post-match weight, to measure hydration. And so at the end of the matches, and a lot of times we used to play, in Central America, and, it was hot in the summertime, no air conditioning. So he'd finish the match and he would say, okay, I need you to take off your shoes, socks, jersey, shorts, and weigh them. And he was astounded by the weight, like the water weight that was in those jerseys and the shoes and everything. And, coming from sports like, well, name it, cycling or whatever, right? Where carrying extra weight is, and it was mind blowing to him. He's like, well, you guys need to jump high, but you jump high and at the end of the match, you're carrying 6 pounds of equipment weight, like what's going on here, So yeah, it was crazy. I mean, back in the day, we used to have 4 or 5 of those jerseys. So we would change them out. But man, if you ever didn't have, or you went through them too quick, yeah, you were lugging an extra couple pounds.
Yeah, I bet that. Thank goodness for technological advancements. Thank God for
exactly.
Mizuno coming up, because I actually, that's a little it's a little too far away, but I have one of the more recent ones. And if you feel the difference in material between what was then and what is now is incredible.
Yeah.
One thing that has advanced too, you mentioned before working with the next gen team this summer. And I mean, first and foremost, you had a bit of an all-star cast of guys to be working with. Dave Preston and John Barrett was involved with that team. Not many people might know him, but my good buddy Matty Harris was involved as well. How impressed were you of kind of the process of where the national team is at these days compared to where it was when you stopped playing back, 2007, 2008? It must kind of be eye-opening to walk into that gym and to see the level at where Canadian volleyball is now compared to where it was at the time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and Grant Wilson this summer, he was involved too, right? So off his national championship.
I apologize, Grant.
Yeah,
I know I might get a text from him about that one.
So yeah, first of all, like the willingness of these guys, John, Grant, Dave, Matt, just the time and effort that goes into it, right? But the level of the athletes is the talent pool is quite deep. Like a few guys that came back. Brendan Mills came back. Eric Sixna. Some of these guys that were just young pros starting out. Cole Duncanson was down in the U.S. and then of course you got all the Canadian guys that were playing here in U Sport. It's really interesting to see the evolution of the game, like so many professionals, I guess, and like the athletes, but also the staff that surrounds the team. We got Mike and Mel and Cass and Carrie McDonald involved now, right? Like just the level of support and structure around there that's lifted the level. I'll say professionalism, not that everybody that wasn't involved previously wasn't professional, but just all of the elements that go into supporting sport, right? As sport has evolved, those things we've been able to keep up, as our Canadian way, like when I was in Calgary, with being located at the University of Calgary, there was a lot of access to physiology and, there's a pretty good support structure there. In Winnipeg, it took some time to build, but we had a really great staff there. Again, from mental performance to, physiology to medical to you name it. In Gatineau now first there's two of them, there's one in Gatineau and there's one in Richmond, but the capacity has increased so much because there's so many more athletes involved, which is it's very rewarding, I guess, to see that Canada is contributing the necessary resources, not to say that, it's the best in the world, but it's very, very good. The daily training environment and being able to create an environment that, like you said, can sustain three consecutive Olympic performances, right? Like that's, really, that's the standard. You know what I mean? Can you get to the Olympics and can you stay at the Olympics, right? So it's, it takes a lot of work, and there's a lot of really good people that are committed to paying the price, I guess you could say, to make sure that the country stays there.
How much of that is due to the things that Glenn implemented back in the days when, you were on your way out and he was just coming in back in, 2006, 2007, 2008?
Yeah. Oh, the structure, the foundational structure is kind of what he brought in, but that's what exists in Italy, in France, in Poland, in Japan, in Brazil, in all these world leading countries, right? The structure of, you've got your senior staff, and then you've got your junior staff, then your U21, then your U19, and you've got your IST at this level, but there's threads of strength and conditioning and movement preparation and recovery and nutrition that trickles all the way down. And these things have existed in Europe for a long time and are essentials. Glenn was the first one, I think, to bring it here and establish. You had the pro guys and the full-time center guys, but now that structure is down. Like the NEP. There's guys, high school age guys now, right, that are there. With Dave. Living this on a daily basis. Also learning how to balance academics. So that's kind of a distinctly Canadian flavor to it too, right? You're going to be an elite athlete and you got to do the things that you need to do to stay healthy and perform at your best athletically. But you also have to be able to compete in the classroom, academically, because that's a key part of of who we are here too and what we need to create.
Yeah. I mean, to me, you know, I've been around now for 15 years, but it does kind of feel like over the years, like the tide has slowly crept in for Canadian volleyball. And like we've always been pretty good, especially in my time at that peak. Like our top level guys have always been pretty good. But there was a time, you know, especially the first half of the 2010s leading up to that first, getting back to the Olympics in the first time, where, you know, Glenn really relied on that upper echelon of guys. You know, we didn't really see even the third guys on the bench, those next guys up to play. And now we're at a point now in 2025 where so many of our key guys from the run to Paris in 2024 either retire or take a year off. And this next generation of guys is able to come in and really perform well at a high level and like beat teams like Japan at the World Championships and put out a good showing, you know, internationally at the VNL. And still, you still have a quality group of guys who is, you know, once again for another year able to finish better than the US at the Pan Am Cup, which is always my barometer. It's like, hey, did we win the Pan Am Cup? Great, you know, like we've medaled at it for the past number of years now, but as long as we've done better than the US, that's my barometer. And you know, of course, we were able to do that
Totally.
again this year. I think it really shows how far it's come because, you know, I think at the upper echelon, you're always looking for those diamond in the rough, or not diamond in the rough, but those diamond athletes. And those are going to be there or not. And you can't control that. But what you can control is the baseline of what the program is. And to me, where the program was to where it is now, that baseline is incredibly higher. What, you know, this team is able to show week in and week out at multiple competitions is really a high level. And I think it's really special.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that's what the game demands now, right? You know, I mean, with the new world ranking structure, you know, it's fairly fluid. You know, points earned and lost in each match. You know, the points available at events like the Pan Am Cup, you know, senior men things. So you're exactly right. You know, like I mean, it just raises the level of everybody involved. You know what I mean, and that expectation that you are carrying the ranking, you know, like you're carrying the senior national team ranking, you know what I mean? Every time you go, you know, or you're carrying the U21 ranking or the U19 ranking, that sort of stuff, right? It just builds all of those things into the daily training environment and everything that you need to do.
You've seen Lewis since the beginning of his career as a player and all of that. Were you impressed by what you saw with him in the gym this summer? I was extremely impressed by what I saw with him in the senior A team throughout this year.
Yeah, it's so I played with him professionally and on the national team for a few years, right? And
okay.
So it's cool to see his passion, you know, his passion for the game, and then his ability to convey that, you know, to the athletes. Yeah, you know, he's lived, you know, the European volleyball experience more than I don't know. You'd be hard pressed to find people that have in this country that, you know, maybe Glenn, you know, there's a few other guys, but you know, in terms of playing and coaching, you know, just total duration of time spent. Dan's been immersed in it. You know, and that's how I kind of explaining to people, you know, like, we understand the game in Canada. You know, I kind of said this before, right? We understand the game in Canada, but when you're doing what he's doing in Europe, or what Glenn did, or what Stelio did, or those guys that, you know, coach in Europe, like you're living it, you know, like day to day for like 9 months, you know, just like you would live the NHL, you'd live MLB, right? And what he's, you know, that's probably the most important part of coaching is, you know, like you have your experiences, but nobody else has the experiences that you have. And he did such a great job, I think, this summer of taking his experiences and then helping the other, you know, just bringing the guys in with enough information and enough knowledge that they're engaged in that process of learning and self-discovery and help driving the thing forward. You know, like he's yeah, I mean, I can watch film with him all day, you know, like it's just so interesting the way that he, you know, he sees the game and how all these things go together, and you know, how he layers in the skill with the biomechanics, with the fundamental strength principles. It's a perspective that not many people have, but you can't unload it all like that on an athlete who doesn't have that perspective, or it doesn't go anywhere, right? And he's really developed I mean, he's still in the process of developing it, you know, but that balance between everything that you need to be successful, you know, physically, mentally, technically, tactically, but then also relationally, that's, such a cool part, right? Because you look at all the guys that really, really have success, you watch Gianni coach France, like that's not how, if you said in Canada, like that's not how people would envision, like a coach player relationship. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's been really good, and he's done an amazing job, and I think he'll continue to do it for sure.
It does kind of feel, like he has really built up on Glenn's shoulders. He played for Glenn for so many years. I still remember him back in the gym, and he was the libero at this point, and he'd be put on the left side for drills before an event, and he'd be like, Glenn, let me swing, let me play left side, let me get out there. Like, even though he was a libero, he still wanted to get out there and play left side. To him coaching for the B team, and the team that was there this summer was majoritarily, all guys that had played for him at the B team level, and then to be able to bring them up and see them on the national level, I thought was really special. And there was a little bit of time there where I was a little unsure of what was going to happen next with, I guess, the coaching pathway within Canadian volleyball. But after seeing him coach the team this year, I'm really excited to kind of see what the next step is, and to see how he evolves with this team.
Yeah. And, I think that's, his, I said before about, vulnerability, right? Like, I think through his passion, and through his commitment, he's not afraid to model that, success at that level requires you to go all in, and he, independent of what you think might happen, I mean, they might win, they might lose, he might be right, he might be wrong. But, the one thing that he brings into the gym every day is his passion and his focus. And, he brings that energy, brings that intensity, right? And that's part of what has to happen in the international season, because there was a time when in international volleyball, you could come, you could finish pro, you could come together, you had some time to build and learn and teach new things. When I was working with Thomas, that's what he said. He said, it would be nice, but there's no time for that. He says, like we get here after the pro season, we have like 8 days or 9 days, and we have to perform. It's finding the balance between, teaching and performing, or learning and performing. And he's done a real good job of that.
Yeah. It must be special to be able to be in the gym kind of with some of your colleagues that you've known for a long time, in the Prestons and the Barretts and, other guys like that, and just to be involved again. Do you feel the same sense of pride when you put on that jacket as a coach as you did when you're putting on the jersey as an athlete?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Yeah, the feeling is the same. You put it on, you prepare for the game, and you get to stand on the floor, listen to the national anthem. Like, it's I've been I'm blessed to do it. Yeah, I've been many times, but it's something that I take seriously. It's a meaningful experience.
I hope so.
Every time. Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, it's easy to have it feel routine. You know what I mean? Like, oh, here we go again. Here we go again. You know what I mean? But each moment is so special. And part of it now is, you go to these, like this last summer we were in Leon, Mexico. You hear some of these NBA guys say, well, this might be the only chance that this person comes to watch me play. You know what I mean? But like, you kind of think, hey, this is, we're in the middle here, and I don't know this city, I don't know these people, but these people chose to invest their time and their money to come and watch this. We're going to give them our best, our best athletic performance, our best coaching performance, our best scouting performance, that's just kind of the way it has to be.
Are you hopeful and positive about where the direction that the program is still currently headed?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think, this next quad, especially, with the U.S. hosting again, huge opportunity again. I mean, with the Americans already qualified, the qualification system is changing again. So it's going back more to the regional systems. So yeah, I think there's a great opportunity to qualify, which is kind of half the battle. That's what Garth used to say, about nationals. He's like, well, you can only win it if you get there, right? So, the opportunity to qualify is there, and then once you qualified, anything can happen. But you gotta get there first. Everything that's happened last year, and I think going forward, the interesting part is now the qualification process being so far out, that already next year, everybody will be yeah, it'll be just be interesting to see how it plays out, but super positive. I think it'll be a great opportunity for the group.
Yeah. I mean, for those who don't know, listening at home, the first qualification process will be this upcoming summer, or maybe early fall, when the NORCECA Championships come to Canada. I don't know if there's an official host yet, but I do know that it's slated for Canada. You know, in my time, we're 50-50. We're 1-1 in qualification possibilities at home. An ill-fated one back in 2016 when we played Cuba, and then another really good one, a really, really good memory back in 2020 when we played Cuba once again. So it'll be an interesting one. So wherever it is, I hope you fans show up. We gotta pat that gym and make it as rowdy as it was in Vancouver in 2020. To wrap things up here, Scott, I really appreciate you taking the time. If you are lucky enough to have UBCO qualify for the national championships, your sons both play for Windsor, who will be hosting nationals. How special would that be to be able to share, U Sport national championships with both of your sons?
Yeah, that would
hopefully you don't pull them in the first round. Like if God forbid you guys end up playing them, maybe if it ends up being, if it's on like the consolation side of the draw is something else. But if you play them in the first round, that would be something else.
Yeah. It would be. We're going there at Christmas time. We're gonna play Windsor and Queens and Western. We'll get a look at some of that competition. Yeah, you know what? It's as a parent and as a volleyball coach and as a volleyball fan, I'm so grateful for the experiences they've had there with James, at Windsor, and for them to both finish their careers, hosting the national championship. I mean, you can't really. You can't script that, you know what I mean? And those opportunities, they got to go to Brandon last year, they'll experience it again this year. Yeah, it would be, I hope we're able to get there and share the stage with them. And like you said, I hope it's, if it is a matchup, I don't even know, maybe the final, but even at that, I don't know, that would be I've never had to coach against them before. I'd have to talk to some of my buddies who've done that, but yeah, it would just be cool and special to be there and share that with them.
Well, Coach, regardless of what happens there, I hope you get that chance. I know it'd be special for you, special for your boys, special for your team as well to potentially make the national championships. You guys have done an unreal job in the first half of the season to be able to put yourselves in a position where it is a very real possibility. Regardless of what happens in the second half, I'm pretty sure you guys are maybe not completely locked in for playoffs, but in a pretty good chance to be able to make the Canada West playoffs. And as you said it yourself, once you get there, anything can happen. I mean, like what we saw with Brandon last year, once you get there, anything can happen. So I remember the first national championships I watched was 2007. And that was when Larry was still coaching at Winnipeg, and Winnipeg ended up beating Alberta. And that was like, Dustin Schneider was setting for that team. Justin Duff was on that team, those guys. And Larry even said, he's like, I don't think we were the best team this season, but we were the best team this weekend. And that's what mattered. So,
yeah, exactly right. Yeah. And that statement there, is what we're after, in our, the last eight games of our year, right? Like we need to be the best team, on each of the weekends that we have left. Like that's kind of our phase. The first part there, we were building and we were learning and we were acquiring things, and but now it's a little bit more real and it's a little bit more performance based, right? And you got to kind of win that weekend. And yeah, I mean, Brandon, man, I went to watch that last year. That's like nothing I've ever seen before, man. That run was something else.
Yeah, I really regret not going. That was last year was was the first year, like since the COVID years, but those don't really count. But in a long time where I hadn't gone to either of the national championships, and I was just too wrapped up in other work things. And I really regret not going, because it would have really been fun to see. Like that was one of the craziest nationals I've ever seen. And I would have really loved to have experienced that atmosphere. And, I really would have loved to have interviewed Grant after winning that tournament. I think that would have been special. So I'm definitely hoping to make my way out to Windsor this year again.
Yeah. Right on. Well, hopefully we can connect there. That would be awesome.
Hopefully. Well, Coach, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today. Tell me a little bit about your team now, but also about all the history and things that you've experienced with Canadian volleyball. there's so few of these. Like, there's no history written somewhere for volleyball in general, let alone Canadian volleyball. So I really relish these opportunities to be able to chat with some of the guys who built the success that we have today. So really appreciate you taking your time and chatting with me, and happy holidays, Merry Christmas. I hope you enjoy your time in Windsor.
Yeah.
Say hi to Gravel for me, and hopefully I get to see you in March.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks to you for telling these stories, right? I mean, it's important to have people telling the stories and spreading the word and spreading the passion for the game. So yeah, I really, really appreciate what you do too. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyways, thanks a lot, guys. And we will see you soon for another episode of Pepper with Everett. Thanks a lot, Scott. Appreciate you. Have a good one, guys.
Thanks,
Bye.
Adam.